So welcome once more to the Mark the Printer's storytelling calendar. This month is The Comrade, told by me, Colin, and illustrated by the wonderful Lisa. While we're here, if you like these stories and you want some live storytelling, then the third Wednesday of every month, we are at Lock 91. In May the 21st, we have the wonderful Kirsty who's going to be telling The Hairy Girl. If you're in or around Manchester on the 21st, please come to our storytelling club. So today's story. Well, you have to be careful when you're a storyteller. You have to avoid plagiarism. He was a poor boy from a poor family. Well, ironically in this story, there isn't a queen, but there is a princess and a king. But we start with Sven. Sven, in his bedroom, in his bed, dreaming. A vivid dream. Such a dream he'd never had before. It was almost a lucid dream. He thought he was there. He was in a princess's bedroom, canoodling. And this princess was beautiful. She had white skin, blood red lips, golden hair, and a body. Such a body that even a storyteller like me could not describe adequately. But when he woke, he was obsessed. He couldn't get this princess out of his mind, and so he sold all of his possessions. And he set off randomly, hoping that by chance he would find the princess. And he walked and he walked and he walked for days, for weeks, for months, until he came across a long road, straight. Couldn't see the end of it. He walked down this road until he came to a town. And there in the town, when he came to the town square, was a block of ice. And inside that block of ice was a corpse. He'd never seen anything like it, so he waited for the pastor to emerge from the church. And he said, "What is this?" And the pastor said, "Well, he was an evil man, and this is his punishment. See, the town folk passed by and they spit onto the block of ice." And Sven said, "Well, what did he do?" And the pastor said, "Well, he was a wine merchant and he was caught watering the wine." And Sven said, "Well, that seems like an excessive punishment. Isn't it about time you gave him a decent burial?" And the pastor said, "Well, no, we can't, because in order to give him a decent burial, we'd have to pay somebody to chip him out of the ice. We'd have to pay an undertaker to dress him. We'd have to pay grave diggers to dig a grave. We'd have to have a pastor to do the service. We'd have to have a bell ringer. We'd have to have a choir to sing. And who's going to pay for all of that?" And Sven took out his wallet and looked at the meagre amount in there and said, "If nobody else will, I will." And so it was arranged. People came, they chipped out the corpse. The undertaker dressed it. The grave diggers dug a hole. He was put in a coffin in the hole. The pastor did a service. People sang, bells rang. And Sven was happy. He didn't have much money left, but he was happy. And so he thanked everybody and he went on his way. And he went along the long, dusty road. He hadn't gone very far when a man came towards him and said, "Hello." And they greeted each other. And the man said, "You look as though you need a servant. I'm a good servant." And Sven said, "Well, I don't really need a servant. I can look after myself. And even if I wanted one, I have no money. I couldn't pay you." And the stranger said, "Well, maybe you need a companion to go with you." And again, Sven shook his head and said, well, I'm actually quite good on my own, but thanks anyway. And the stranger said, I can tell, just by looking at you, you're on a quest, and I can help. I can be your comrade. And Sven smiled and said, okay, you've talked me into it. Yes, you can be my comrade. And they set off, with the comrade in front leading the way. And the two of them walked and walked and walked until they came to a cliff face. There seemed to be no way round it. They couldn't climb it. But the comrade knocked 3 times on the stone and a door appeared. And he walked inside and they walked under the hillside until they came to a chamber. And there was a witch. Now, I don't know whether any of you who are watching this are witches. If so, I'd like to apologize. This was long, long ago. Attitudes were different. The witch had 6 chairs. And she said to Sven and his comrade, take a seat. You look as though you could do with the rest. But the comrade said, no, you sit down. And the witch was forced to sit in one of the chairs. Magic chairs, of course. And she couldn't get up. She couldn't leave the chair. And while she was stuck there, the comrade looked around until he saw on the wall a sword. And he took it from the wall and he said, I'm taking the sword. And the witch said, no, this is the sword of the 3 sisters. You can't take it. My twin sisters will be furious. And he said, not only am I taking your sword, but you will be stuck in that chair for at least 3 days. That's the most he could magic up. Or until somebody releases you. And he took the sword, and Sven and the comrade walked through the rest of the hill to an exit on the other side and continued on their way. And they walked and they walked and they walked until there was another cliff face in front of them. No way round, no way to climb up. But again, the comrade knocked 3 times on the stone and a door opened. They went in, they went through under the hillside until they came to a chamber, and there was another witch. Another 6 chairs. And she said, both of you sit down. I'll get you something to eat. And the comrade said, no, you sit down. And she was forced to do so. And as soon as she sat in that chair, she could not get out of it. And the comrade looked around and round until he opened a drawer, and there was a ball of golden thread. And he said, I'm taking this. And she said, no, you can't. That thread belongs to the 3 sisters. And if my 2 sisters find you've taken it, they'll be furious. And he said, not only are you taking it, but you must stay in that chair for 3 days, or until somebody comes to rescue you. And they left through to the door on the other side, and they emerged. And they walked and they walked and they walked, and you'll never guess what they found. Another wall, a cliff, no way round, too sheer to climb. But again, the comrade knocked on the door, and the door knocked on the stone, and the door opened. They walked in, they found a chamber. There was the 3rd witch, another set of 6 chairs. And she said, sit down, rest your limbs, I'll get you something to drink. And the comrade said, no, you sit down. She was forced to sit. And the comrade searched around until on the back of a cupboard door, he saw a hat. He took the hat and said, I'm taking the hat. And she said, no, that hat belongs to the 3 sisters. My other sisters will be furious. And he said, not only am I taking the hat, but you cannot get out of that chair for 3 days or until somebody rescues you. He left her behind, and they went through and out the exit at the back, and they walked. And so the comrade and Sven, they carried on in their journey until they came to a river, a raging river. Looked this way and that way, there was no bridge. And the comrade said, take that ball of golden thread, hang on to one end and throw the other against the hillside. Sven did this and it bounced back until it was back in his hands. He said, do it again. And he did, and he did, and he did, until there was a rope bridge, but sturdy and solid. And the two of them walked across. And the comrade said, and now be quick, gather it in, because I can see those witches. It must be 3 days, they're all released. And Sven pulled it in, wrapped it round, and the tail of the string, the cord, was in the middle of the river when the witches arrived, and they dived in to try and get it, but they were too late. And again, apologies to any witches out there, but they all died. And Sven and his comrade carried on their journey in search of the mysterious princess. And they walked and they walked and they walked until they came to a palace. And the comrade said to Sven, this is where your princess lives. Now go up to the door, tell the guard you want to speak to the king, tell the king about your dream and how you wish to woo his daughter, and everything will be fine. That's what Sven did. He went, he knocked, he was allowed in, the king seemed pleased to see him, gave him and Sven a delightful room and said, I will invite you down for dinner and you can meet the princess for yourself. And so they bathed, they dressed in the cleanest clothes they had. They went downstairs and there was a feast, and at the head of the table was the princess, exactly as he remembered her, with the white skin and the blood-red lips and the golden hair. And she smiled. She seemed pleased to see him. And he said that he wished to marry her. And she said, I'm not against the idea, but there are just these 3 little tests that you must accomplish. Don't worry, they're not dangerous. And he said, fine, what's the first test? And she produced a pair of golden scissors. And she said, all I want you to do is to look after them for tonight and hand them back to me at breakfast tomorrow. And you'll have passed the first test. And he said, oh, I'm sure I can do that. And he put the scissors into his pocket. And they wined and they dined and they were entertained by jugglers and dancers and singers. And as he was distracted, the princess put her hand in his pocket, took out the golden scissors, put it in her pocket. And around about 10 o'clock that night, everyone said, well, that's fine, everybody goes to bed now. Be down for breakfast in the morning. And he went back to the room that he was sharing with his comrade. His comrade said, well, what happened? And he explained. And the comrade said, and you still have the scissors, yes? And he said, yes. And he put his hand in his pocket. And he said, no. And the comrade said, well, good job I'm here. I will get them back for you. And he took the sword and the magic hat. And he went down to the barn, and there in the barn was a giant goat, enormous. And the comrade said to the goat, you're a flying goat, yes? And the goat said, yes. And he said, and you take the princess on your back and fly to her lover? And the goat said, yes. And he said, what time tonight? And the goat said, I can't tell you that. It's forbidden. And so the comrade took the sword, and with the flat of the sword, he whacked the goat on the head. And the goat bleated and said, no more, no more. Midnight is the time. And so the comrade hid, and then he put on the magic hat, which of course made him invisible. And when the princess arrived at midnight, she jumped on the back of the goat, and he jumped behind her. And the goat took off into the air, and it flew over land, it flew over sea. It didn't take long before it landed in front of a dwelling. And she went up to the door, she opened the door, and she went in. And inside was a troll. And the troll said, "It's great to see you again," and they hugged. And she was bewitched. She was controlled by a female troll. And the troll said, "Any news?" And she said, "You'll never believe, another suitor came today to ask for my hand in marriage." And the troll said, "Well, so you set a task? What was the task?" And she said, "These scissors must be given back to me tomorrow morning." And the troll said, "Right, I'll get my strongest case." And he opened the lid, and there was a triple lock. And she threw the scissors into that chest. But the comrade, invisible, put out his hand and he caught the scissors before they left, and they became invisible. And the troll slammed the lid. He locked it 3 times. He took the keys and he put them into a hollow tooth in his mouth and said, "Behead him in the morning, yes?" Well, that morning, the princess came and she mounted the giant goat. Before it could take off, the comrade jumped up, sat behind her. They went across the sea and the land and landed by the palace. And he went up the stairs to the room and he gave Sven the golden scissors. Breakfast was caused. He went downstairs and a laughing, jovial, happy princess said, "So, my love, can I have my golden scissors back?" And he said, "Yes, of course." And he took them out of his pocket and he gave them to her. And her face went pale, which was remarkable because it was fairly pale to start with. But she pulled herself together and she said, "Well done, yes. First task done. That was easy, wasn't it? Second task, I have this book. It's very dear to me. Look after it for me, give it me back in the morning and the second task will be done." And so there was a meal, there was drink, there was entertainment, there were jugglers, there were singers, there were dancers. And as he was distracted, she went into his pocket and she pulled out the book and put it in her own. At 10 o'clock, it was bedtime for everyone. And so they all went to their various rooms. And a comrade said, "Sven, what was this task?" And he said, "A book. I just have to keep the book until the morning." And the comrade said, and you still have it?" And he said, "Yes, it's gone." And the comrade said, "Don't worry, I'll get it for you." And he went downstairs and he went to the barn and he got the goat to tell him when the princess was coming down to visit her lover at midnight. And he waited and he put his hat on to become invisible, and when she came in and jumped on the goat, he jumped behind her. They set off over land and sea. They came to the dwelling of the troll. She went inside. And the troll said, "Right, what is the second task you've given?" And she said, "I gave him this book and told him to give it to me in the morning." And the troll said, "Well, we know what happened last time. We don't mess about. Give me the book, I'll throw it in the fire, we'll burn it, and then how can he bring it back?" And so he threw it in the fire. And the comrade grabbed it out of the air, made it invisible with himself. And in the morning, when the princess leapt on the giant goat and he leapt behind, they went across land and sea and they landed again outside the palace. He rushed upstairs and he gave Sven the book. When breakfast was caused, he came downstairs and the princess, all smiles and happiness, said, "Can I have my book back?" He went into his pocket and said, "Yes, of course," and handed the book. And she just couldn't believe it. She'd seen it being thrown into the fire. How could it be returned? But she pulled herself together and said, "This is a story, so there are 3 themes and a third task. You must bring me the thing that I am thinking of now, And Sven went upstairs and he said to the comrade, now all is lost. She wants the thing that she was thinking of. How am I supposed to know? And the comrade said, I will sort it out for you. And he went down to the barn with the big goat and he hit the goat on the head, got the goat to say that the princess would be coming at 1 a.m. And he waited, he put on his hat, which made him invisible. When she arrived and went on the goat, he jumped up behind. They set off over land and sea to the troll's dwelling. She went in, and the troll said, but anyway, did you set him a third task? And she said, yes, and it's a doozy. I asked him to fetch the thing that I was thinking of at the time. And the troll said, clever. And what were you thinking of at the time? And she said, well, I was expecting that he would be beheaded. So the thing that came into my mind was you being beheaded. And so I was thinking of your head. And the troll laughed and said, well, that's not going to happen. Tell you what, in the morning we'll travel back because I'd like to see the death of this man. And in the morning there were 2 giant goats, and the troll leapt onto one and Comrade leapt behind him. The princess leapt on the other and they took off and they flew over land and sea until they came to the palace. And the princess jumped off her goat and said, I'm going to prepare myself for breakfast. You wait here. The beheading will be later. And he wandered around and he looked around the palace, and there, I don't know whether you've ever seen the Tarantino film, From Dusk Till Dawn. There was a huge pit behind the palace and it wasn't filled with trucks and truckers. No, it was filled with the bones of previous suitors. And as he wandered back and got round to the front of the palace again, the comrade, invisible, took out his sword and cut off the head of the troll, took it by the hair, went up the stairs and gave it to Sven and said, this is the final piece of the puzzle. And when breakfast was called, he went downstairs with his hand behind his back. And the princess said, right, well, today is the day of your execution because I don't think it's possible for you to bring me what I want. And Sven said, well, is it this? And he produced the troll's head, put it on the table. And the princess screamed. And as she screamed, a kind of black smoke seemed to emanate from her body. And the spell was broken. And the troll was gone, leaving just a normal, quite vacuous but very, very pretty princess. And they were married, great ceremony, and the king said, you can have half my kingdom. And the comrade took the sheep back and forwards, loaded with the treasure from the troll's dwelling, and brought it back until they needed 12 giant goats to carry the loot back to Sven's house. And they were so heavy that the goats couldn't fly, and so they had to walk. And when they got within a mile of his home, the comrade stopped and said, I can go no further. And Sven said, no, of course you must come back. I couldn't have done any of this without you. You must have a reward. What reward do you want? And the comrade said, well, how about this? In a year's time, you bring me half of everything that you have. And Sven said, yes, of course, more than half. And the comrade said, no, half. A year passed. Sven came back to that very spot, and there was the comrade waiting. 13 giant goats laden down with treasure, and said, here is half of everything that I have. And the comrade said, well, it's not everything, is it? Sven said, what do you mean? He said, in this year you've had a child, a baby girl. That's yours. I need half of it. And Sven couldn't believe it. He thought this was his friend. But a deal was a deal, and so he went back to his house and he got got the baby girl, he brought it back, he laid it on the ground, and the comrade took the sword in his hands and stopped and said, I don't want half of your baby, and I don't want any of your treasure. How do you feel? And Sven said, euphoric, happy, glorious, relieved, wonderful. And the comrade said, now you know how I felt when you released me from that block of ice in front of that church all that long time ago. And now I can go in peace. And he turned. And as Sven watched, he turned and he walked away. And as he walked, the further he got, the kind of more misty and transparent he got, until finally he was gone. And that was the story of Sven and his comrade. Thank you.